Hey, this is Tony with Lonestar Coops, and today we're going to go over the process for cutting your rafters, the bird's mouth, the rafter cuts, and notching them for the purlins. I want to start off by saying this is not a complete rafter tutorial. If you just happened across this video on YouTube, these are specific rafter and purlin instructions for the 6-foot by 12-foot coops from Lonestar Coops. To begin, you're going to need your rafters, which you have pre-cut into sections of 3 feet 10 and 7/16 inches. You'll need a measuring tape, ideally a roofing square, and a pencil. Now, to make sure we have this as accurate as possible, we're going to measure and mark on the bottom of the rafter at 1 and 7/16 inches. Our roof has a 5/12 pitch, so we're going to grab the roofing square, locate the 5 on the common scale. Then we're going to rotate it from that top corner till the 5 lines up with the bottom of the board. And if that is accurately done, it should exactly match your mark on the board that you measured 1 and 7/16 inches. Go ahead and draw your line. That's where we're going to cut. On the other end, we're going to do the same thing, but this time we're going to put the measuring tape on the top of the board and measure 1 and 7/16 inches. This time we'll put the roofing square on the bottom of the board, carefully align the corner, locate our 5, and then we're going to rotate that till the line on the 5 lines up with the outer edge of the bottom of the board. If that's correct, your roofing square should line up with the mark that you made on the top of the board. And we'll go ahead and draw that line in. For our bird's mouth, we want to measure 5 and 15/16 inches from the bottom of the board. And then from that line we drew on the top, we'll also go 5 and 15/16 inches. And just to make sure we have our line accurate, we will put the roofing square on there and rotate it from the bottom till we line up the 5 on the common scale with the bottom of the board. Now that we know where our bird's mouth is going to be, we want to measure up 1/4 of an inch and draw a line perpendicular from there. And I like to shade that in just so there's no mistakes made. We know this is the piece that we're going to be removing. If you have a miter saw, you're going to set it for 22.5 degrees. If not, just use a circular saw on the lines that you made. We're going to go ahead and cut off the ends of the rafters, starting with the right end. And then we will just do the same thing on the other end. You can use a small handsaw or your jigsaw to remove the little triangle for the bird's mouth. We will repeat that process for the second rafter, and once we have 2 complete, we can line them up like this and measure from one bird's mouth to the other, and it will be exactly 72 inches. And here I'm just showing you that we have from the bird's mouth to the end of the rafter tail, it's going to be a 5.5 inch overhang over the front and back side of the coop. I made a little mock-up here of a pretend wall and the rafter sitting on it, just to show you why the 1/4 inch on the bird's mouth is so important. The height of the bird's mouth has to do with how the eave spacer fits on the assembly. We're upside down here for a second just because I want you to see what I'm talking about, but pretend we have a eave spacer between each rafter. We want to make sure that the top of that eave spacer does not go above the top of the rafter. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera around so you can kind of see what I'm talking about if we were standing on the ground and looking at it from the other side. Now, if you did finish all your rafters and your bird's mouth are too deep, it's not the end of the world. You're just going to have to do a little bit of extra work to cut the edges off of all of your eave spacers so that they don't protrude like this above your rafters. Now with our circular saw, we're going to cut in the notches for the purlins, starting with the tail end of the rafter where the bird's mouth is. We're going to measure on the top 3 1/4 inches and just put a line across the 1.5 inch side of the board. Now going to the other side of the rafter, we're going to measure from the top 2.5 inches back. And then we're going to go a 3.5 inch width and make our second mark. And for our middle notch, we're going to measure 22 inches back from the top of the board. Make our first mark and then go back 3.5 inches to mark the other end of that notch. Before you start cutting, it's a good idea just to recheck all your measurements. 3 1/4 inches on the tail end, 3.5 inches on the other notches. And in the process of checking my work here, I actually figured out that my second notch was not quite 3.5 inches, so I need to remark it real quick. Our notches are going to be a 3/4 inch depth, so go ahead and take a minute to adjust the depth setting on your circular saw to 3/4 inch and then lock that in. The easiest way to get these notches done is just a bunch of repetitive passes with your circular saw and then breaking out the remaining bits with a hammer or chisel and then chiseling the peaks and valleys so that you have a flat surface in your notch once it is complete. Just a couple reminders, it is good to have a sharp chisel. If you just bought one from a store, they're usually not sharp or not sharp enough, so get a sharpener or use one if you have one at home. And take special care not to get your fingers in the way when you're chiseling, because it is very easy to cut yourself while you're doing this. Keep your free hand, free fingers out of the way of the direction the chisel is pointing. I like to use a 3/4 inch wide piece of 2x4 to double check my work. You lay it in there and make sure that it's perfectly flat. And in here, this right side is not laying flat. So that means the depth of my circular saw was not deep enough. So I went ahead and adjusted it a little deeper and go ahead and fix this, recheck it, and now it is sitting flush. You do not want that little test jig to extend over the top of the rafter. If you do have that problem, it will only be on your first notch. Once you have your circular saw dialed in properly, all the rest will be to the exact right depth. So repeat your notching on the middle and then on the tail end like this. On the tail end, it's usually easiest to start on the left side. And then if you have any remaining bit, you can use a jigsaw just to chop that off. The reason for the test jig is you don't want to get these installed up on the roof and then find out that you didn't quite cut them wide enough for a 2x4 to fit on there, or you don't have a flat surface for your metal roof. Once we've done this 2 times, we have one complete set of rafters, and they should look exactly the same. It's the same basic concept for notching the purlins. They're going to lay across your rafters like this, so we're going to notch the wide side of the purlin 1.5 inches. Should look like this on each of your purlin notches, and you can double check that with your jig to make sure that it's flush. And when they're done, they should fit together nicely like this and be perfectly flush together. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you have any questions during your build process, please reach out to us via our support line or email.